Africa. Okay. Lynette Oxley here for Tax Shack Tactical TV. I'm here with Max. Thank you very much for joining me, Max. You are a legal person, and you've just recently been to one of the bilateral meetings with the CSP, Civilian Secretariat for Police.
That's correct, yes. Thank you very much for having me, Lynette. Thought it would be prudent for us to discuss the developments, yeah.
So basically this thing is not over. The thing on the proposed amendments to the Firearms Control Act is definitely not gone. So there's been a lot of these bilateral meetings. GOSA has been quite strong about that these meetings and bilateral meetings is not a good thing. You've recently been on the, I think it was the 24th of May. Can you maybe give me background why you were at the meeting and why you think this bill is we've not seen the end of this bill yet?
Sure. Thank you, Lynette. Yeah, so I was tasked in 2021, quite soon after the proposed amendment bill was published in the Government Gazette, to attend to an impact assessment, obviously in the form of an objection, obviously the bill in its entirety, but also the impact on sport shooting in South Africa, specifically tasked by SAPSA, the South African Practical Shooting Association. The document ended up being 62 pages dealing only with sport shooting and the negative impacts and the threat to lawful South African firearm ownership. And it was received by what I can only imagine to be the Secretariat in its comments in the public participation phase, which, obviously what was mentioned at the meeting, I must state that there's normally these bills or these draft bills are published in the Government Gazette, and they offer the public an opportunity to voice their opinions, or rather the stakeholders and public in general to voice their opinions and views on the proposed amendments. And thanks to the hard work of GOSA, other parties such as DRSA, there was excellent public participation from the representative community of the lawful firearm owning community in South Africa. And I think it was an eye-opener for the draft team, the CSP draft team, to receive this vehement sort of kickback where firearm owners were saying, well, we can't accept this bill at all. The provisions from the repeal of self-defense, the removal of self-defense as a reason to lawfully possess a firearm, to the ridiculous limitation imposed under sections 15 and 16 for self-defense, the effects on dealers, the effects on the training industry, the effects on pretty much every single firearm. Yeah, I mean, the removal of reloading and hand loading. And, when those points were addressed on Tuesday, the CSP was quite shocked to find out what the actual value of firearms is, the cost of ammunition, the cost of participation for serious sport shooters and non-serious sport shooters and hunters alike. But I don't think, and this is something that I think is important to realize, is that the team tasked with drafting this legislation, with respect, obviously, is absolutely devoid of any knowledge, conceptualization, understanding, appreciation of firearm ownership and lawful firearm ownership at that. And, they're unaware of the value of firearms. They're unaware of what shooting sports there are, the different disciplines. They're unaware of, the cost of ammunition, the benefit of hand loading ammunition, for instance. And what we've picked up is that these bilaterals tend to be sort of a probe for a bottom line from their side. They want to know, so how many guns would you be happy with, and, but self-defense, what's your problem with the repeal of self-defense? Like, there's this void-like logic being applied, and it's very, you can see that obviously it's ideology-based, And Mr. Hood, Martin Hood, was also in attendance, and he refused to enter any doctrine or ideology arguments with him. You know, they want to now, you know, engage on an ideological basis. And I think he's been around the block a few times as well with this kind of thing. And Absolutely. He was like, well, we're not going down that road. And what was quite interesting is there were a couple of points raised by him as to the legitimacy of the actual drafting team being empowered by legislation to draft. You know, why are you guys drafting? You know, and that included, you know, Advocate Dawn Bell and a couple of the parties on the panel, which there were legal representatives, and there was a representative from SAPS Legal. So I think it was a panel of about 5 CSP representatives. And, you know, there were a couple of instances where they actually became irate and sort of annoyed with Mr. Hood for asking particular questions towards the end. So, you know, we started out addressing both associations of that day during the bilateral that were asked to engage, were the Clay Target Shooting Association of South Africa and SAPSA, the South African Practical Shooting Association of South Africa. And both made their submissions and rejections. And we started addressing, you know, we started scratching at the legitimacy of these bilaterals and why were the stakeholders not consulted before this commenced? And number 2, on what research was the decision based to actually amend the legislation? You know, so we started opening that door, and obviously we met quite a bit of discomfort and resistance on that basis, which was disheartening to say the least, because it later on rolled out into them explaining, well, don't worry, I mean, we've taken your suggestions into consideration and we will report to the minister, because that's the next step. You know, this isn't part of the constitutional law passing process yet. This is pre that. So we're still in the pre-parliamentary phase, which is still the drafting phase, if I could put it that way. So what I found quite interesting is there was a comment made, I can't quote the relevant person, obviously for the sake of not misquoting them, but it came down to, we will advise the minister on the comments that we've received where we deem it relevant. So, you know, that discretion that this drafting panel has and what they are going to convey to the minister in their how can I say it, their proposed amendments to the draft amendment itself, you know, fixing it or making it more operable or that kind of thing. And that's why they're looking for bottom lines. You know, there was an offhand comment at lunchtime by one of the representatives, which was tantamount to, so, I mean, surely you guys are not saying that, you know, Section 16 can't have any limits, you know, of being, you know, dedicated sport shooting or hunting. Surely there must be, you know, a certain number of guns that is, you know, the limit or the enough guns. And I said, well, not really. And I think you're probing the wrong, you know, the wrong side of the table for that kind of answer, because if I could afford them, I would have all the guns, you know, and it's as simple as that. And there's no reason why I shouldn't, because if I'm capable or competent to possess one, I'm capable and competent to possess 100 or 200 or 300. There's no cap. So, you know, their ideology is driven. There's obviously an agenda. I believe it's neo-political. There's a lot of pressure internationally on firearm ownership. The recent events in the States or globally have not been of great assistance in the, you know, the anti-gun agenda. And I think everybody is privy to the social media, which, you know, or the social media outcry, which comes out where the uninformed or the non-firearm owner is saying, well, if guns are gone, or if guns are regulated and taken away, then there's no more gun violence, which, you know, they ignore socio-political realities. They ignore the fact that there's a black market for firearms that are, as it's the same as drugs. We were saying illegal drugs. If you, drugs are illegal. You can't sell cocaine in a shop. But that does not mean that it's not freely available, you know, or accessible in South Africa. So the ideology conflict at this stage is a challenge. And I don't think it's a challenge that will ever be ironed out between the anti-gun and the pro-gun parties, being, for instance, GFSA, the Gun Free South Africa representatives, which obviously also have input with the panel at some stage. And, there's the drafting team being completely objective or neutral in the middle, is taking input and statistics from one source, and it's not being countered with adequate anti-statistics, in my view, from the gun side of things, the pro-gun side of things. So I'm of the view that this is going to become a question of objective statistics and facts, proper interpretation of the reports that they base their decision to amend the legislation on. And we are not done. There's a lot of work to do. And obviously it would be best if we could nip this amendment in the bud before we get to the parliamentary stage, because there's been a lot of discussion, and I know that GOSA is busy motioning strongly towards getting down to the bottom of where the mandate came from to amend and on what basis. And there's a lot of hard work to be done, and I'm of the view that firearm owners and the firearm owning community needs to be mindful of the fact that this proposed bill could change, and on a very negative and prejudicial basis, could change lawful firearm ownership in South Africa forever. And there's no coming back from this. One step backwards in this, in this sphere, or the ideology and the psychology behind firearm ownership globally, one step back is going to be disastrous. It will result in catastrophe for lawful firearm ownership, and it's just we cannot take this lying down as a community. And obviously it is going to call for community investment, because we can't. It's as if after this amendment, after the public participation phase took place, it was very effective, and it did settle it down, and it stopped the steamroller effect. But I don't think people realize that it didn't kill the amendment, it killed the process. The drafting team is under mandate to complete this consultation phase and get it over with now, because the minister wants to know what's going on with the amendment. So, we've got to note that this agenda is going to have to be met with rands and pennies out of the pocket of the firearm owner, and we're going to have to start fighting this on a serious basis, not a casual basis. I mean, the public participation phase showed that the lawful firearm owning community in South Africa is able to mobilize and to work effectively. Although it was not enough, it's still not enough. We need more. We need people to get engaged and to participate, to show their support, and to be mindful of the fact that this isn't over. And I'm trying to drive the point home. That's why I think the petition keeps kicking in. But people need to realize that this is serious. It has severe consequences if it's not met with adequate force or with adequate
resistance.
Wrong word, yeah. If it's not met with adequate urgency and adequate, mindfulness that this is literally the line. This is the line that I think the anti-gun lobby has been waiting for, to push this agenda to the drafting team, to say, look at all the bad things that guns do, with an absolute skewed statistical input, and it's not being counted because we don't know what's being said.
Absolutely. So basically 2 points that I would like to make is, if you look at the ideology of pushing certain agendas, they pushed and they got pushed back. If you look at communism, if you want to put it in that terms, people push a little bit, you get resistance, they back off. They have backed off a little bit, they're pushing again. And these bilateral discussions that we have now is them pushing the agenda further. And what worries me, my second point is that it worries me that the bilaterals are just a way for them to tick a box and do whatever they want to do. That is my feeling.
It is disingenuous.
And they also just want to, they don't want to come out who was actually involved after the Wits report in actually this, the amendments. They do not want to say. Why do they not want to say? There's been prior requests from GOSA, and they still don't want to say who is involved. Why? What are they hiding?
Well, I'm relieved to hear that finally the CSP sort of gave in, and they've offered GOSA an opportunity, or speaking opportunity, in its own meeting, which I think is going to be of immense value to uncovering what the agenda is behind this entire amendment, because we still cannot conceive how the amendment is sprung per simple publication, in Government Gazette, without anybody being alluded to the fact that this amendment was in the pipeline. And the amendments themselves, with respect, after having had consideration to the papers in extreme detail, I think I've literally summarized the entire amendment document and written, criticism or constructive input on each clause. There is an absence, and I think I noted that a bit earlier, but there's just an absolute absence of relatability or understanding to firearms. And for instance, the purpose of the Act, they want to remove reference to the rights to life and bodily integrity. That
is where it started with me, and that's right in the preamble of the changes, and I've got a massive issue with that, because that is our basis of self-defense, bodily integrity, etc., etc.
And that gives them the essentially, that was the lining for the repeal of sections 13 and 14, which is self-defense. And they didn't seem to, I don't know, the penny doesn't drop. I think there were one or two police officials on the the drafting team, which I could see, it's logical that we live in one of the most homicidal nations in the world.
Absolutely.
It's immensely troubling, and the question is we're not 100% certain as to how genuine are in respect of receiving the submissions from the body. And we actually had a discussion before we went in, and we decided we're not going to delve too deeply into ideological arguments or the minutiae, the point for point argument. We raised broad arguments, especially on the section 16, given the relevance of the meeting. Obviously, there's arguments to be made for the defensive side of things. There's arguments made for the industrial side of things, but this was specifically focused on sport shooting. And, section 16's amendments itself, I think after explaining to them that, so there was one recommendation in the, in the amendment that section 16 dedicated status holders, if they fail to maintain that dedicated status for the period of a year or for any year, if they lose that dedicated status, the license must be terminated. Now this just creates, and it's a point that I raised in the meeting, that this just creates the exact same problem as it did with section 24 of the Act with renewals, because there's no insight, or there's no understanding reflected that potentially a dedicated sport shooter was not in the financial position to shoot the requisite number of matches, or a dedicated hunter couldn't afford to go on 2 prescribed hunting activities that year.
In a hospital, sick or something.
Accident, or he was ill, or always overseas for work. There's this
disconnect.
That's the perfect word. There's this disconnect between the realities and the prejudice. They don't understand why, because we explained to them. So you're telling me, let's say I've got 300,000 rands worth of guns in the safe, which these days isn't a lot of guns, and you end up looking at considerations of, let's say it's a double rifle, a side-by-side dangerous game double rifle. Minimum, let's say 100,000 rand. Okay. So let's say I cannot maintain, because I was in hospital, I was overseas for work, and I couldn't maintain my dedicated sport shooting status. Obviously not on purpose or, obviously without any mens rea or criminal intent, or animus, but now my dedicated status lapses. Now, my accredited sport shooting or hunting association must now report to the registrar and say, listen, this guy's status has lapsed. We need to cancel his license. That's the connect that they want. And I'm saying to them that, again, with Section 24, there was no out. There was no, but in certain circumstances, if there's, good cause, or if there was whatever the wording may be, if there was good cause, or if it could be shown that there's a legitimate reason for not renewing timeously, even innocent administrative error, I forgot, it's like a vehicle license or that kind of thing. It's this human consideration, and by making that mistake or by being unable to renew, I'm now in unlawful possession of a firearm. So it's legislation now from two fronts that they want to criminalize the firearm owner. They didn't even look at the renewal section under, in the amendments. With the two amnesties that just passed. I mean, the practical disconnect and the actual operation, and what was most troubling, and it's something that Martin and I noted and discussed afterwards, what was most troubling is that this CSP that has been engaging with stakeholders since what my understanding is February, they're shocked when they are told that it's taking X amount of time for licenses to be approved. Papers are being lost. The CFR, the registry itself in Pretoria is just in a disastrous state. Cards are taking so many months to print. Renewals aren't, if people's licenses expire, they're just buggered. There's no other word. There's no way out. And they seem shocked, and they can't believe that it's in this. But how from February, after every single stakeholder has advised you that it's a disaster, are you still shocked or disappointed? Or so there's a little degree of distrust or it's a little bit disingenuous and concerning, because they were acting as if they couldn't believe that this is the case.
It is, again, just, I think these bilateral meetings is just trying to rubber stamp and saying we have followed the process, and then just going ahead with what they wanted to do. And that's been my feeling right from the start. The other thing is, if you have a look at where the Wits report came from, if you look at what's his name, Ricky Mann, he did a whole 34 pages on how taking the research and then being flawed into what they've done with the Amendment Act. There's just no connection. They just do whatever they want. Never mind what the input is from stakeholders at this stage.
100%. And the whole proliferation of firearms in South Africa argument is bizarre, but it's real. There's this reach that the proliferation of firearms in South Africa is a serious issue. It doesn't distinguish between the proliferation of illegal firearms.
Absolutely. Which the Wits report says is a problem. It's illegal firearms and policing.
Correct. So, when raising the policing issues, obviously the eyebrows on the other side of the table are, up in the air. But
Absolutely.
Lynette, I think from my side, apologies, I know that I've been rambling now for about 20 minutes. But
just give us a last message.
The closing from my side is the community needs to realize that we're in for a boxing match. Obviously, the representative institutions and public participation platforms are going to be crucial in overcoming this, or at least driving sense into the parties that be, because at this stage it feels like it may be a tick box exercise. I'm not sure as to how genuine they are. When I say they, I mean the drafting team are in saying, well, because they jot down notes and they sit there and it's very serious and they take in consideration. But how much of that is actually going to be implemented in whatever they propose to the minister? And first of all, they say what's relevant we'll convey to the minister, and then obviously the minister still has the. Well, I don't care. That's the amendment bill. Push it through. So I don't know how much objectivity is being, implemented in this process. I can't say that I anticipate much, but at the same time, it would be unfair to assume. So I'm not assuming anything, but I can just say that the amendment issue, the draft amendment bill has not gone away, and it's hurtling towards the parliamentary process where it'll have to go through the checks and balances in Parliament, where again, there are 2 phases of public participation at a later stage. But the draft is being prepared and tinkered on and, manipulated and amended and what have you, but it's happening and it's carrying on and it's steaming forward. So I'm hopeful that GOSA'S meeting with the CSP is going to be fruitful. Best of luck to Paul with that, and the rest of us in the sphere will continue, fighting the good fight together. And I think that's all that we can do at this stage. But again, we can't fight the fight without money, and that's a serious concern. I think that it's going to end up in every gun owner having to again, fight the fight with actual rands and cents, and it's not a nice reality that we're in, but unfortunately we don't have the NRA funding or the lobby funding that that there are in larger states or countries. So I think we've got a long way to go and a lot of hard work to do, but we are fighting, we are focused, we are familiarizing ourselves with this process every day. It's quite an unfamiliar territory. We've stated that it's not a green paper and white paper type exercise, which would be the normal legislative process, because it's an amendment stemming directly from the minister. So it's quite complex and it's not very straightforward, but we're getting there.
Thank you very much for your time, and again, and cheers. Let's see what happens.
Thank you, Lynette. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye.
Okay, let me stop the recording.